Go ahead, Deb.
Hi, welcome to the webinar from CALI. My name is Deb Quintel. I'm the Director of Curriculum Development, and I work with authors who are using CALI Author to write lessons. Today's topic is a continuing webinar discussing CALI Lessons. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm back, sorry. It's a continuing session on using CALI Author. Today's topic specifically is the Toolbar Button. The Toolbar Button is pretty straightforward, and it can also be used in more complex ways. So I'm going to attempt to move you through my PowerPoint. Hopefully you're seeing my PowerPoint here. Austin? Yep. Great, yep. Thanks for the check. Before we get going, I want to remind everyone that all of our webinars are recorded and archived up to Blip TV, and you can see the whole continuing ongoing sessions that we've got. It's pretty exciting. And panelists, here I am on the far left, my colleague Austin Greathouse, who runs these, and then our Executive Director, John Mayer, is also online. Everyone want to say hello?
Hello.
Hello.
I guess that's everyone. All right, great. So the Toolbar Button. Basically, we've got 4 things to cover today. Finding the Toolbar Button in CALI Author, creating a Toolbar Button, how you can use it as a tool for navigation and some fancy things, and then how do you get rid of a toolbar. So let me get started here, and I'm going to pull over CALI Author, and you should see the inside of a lesson. I'm in authoring mode here of CALI Author, and yesterday I opened up a new CALI Author lesson, which if you're interested in how to get this far with CALI Author, we've got webinars part 1 and 2 that go there. And I created a number of pages and things so we'd have a template to work with today. You can see on the far left side I've opened up the hierarchy of the lesson, and I've added an introduction page and then some question pages and things like that. So what we're going to basically do is, first of all, just create a toolbar button. So let's suppose this is the student mode here I'm flipping into. This is just a sample lesson. And we're going to figure out how to get this CALI Author lesson posted either to Blip TV or available somewhere on the CALI website. So if you want to tinker with it afterwards, also it's available to you. In the meanwhile, you can just email me and I'll send it directly to you. So to add a toolbar button, I'm going to click on the Info tab, and that's where all the activity happens. First, I want to point out to you over in the lower right-hand corner here is what we call our remote control. And a toolbar button is going to appear in this region here that I'm trying to move my cursor in. It's going to appear just above the remote control when we add it in. That's where they're located once created. So as I said, I go to my Info tab, and I click on the Toolbar Button or tab there, and it looks pretty blank and intimidating, but never fear, you always click on New when in doubt. So I click on New, and its default name is Button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this name, and I'm just for simplicity going to call it Toolbar Button. You see I'm a bad typist, which is why I typed a lot yesterday. All right, Toolbar Button. So now I have a button, but it needs to go somewhere. It needs a destination or a link, as we call it in CALI Author. So I'm going to press this button on the right of the word link. You can't type in these fields here. I know it's very enticing, but this link field you can't type in. There are some fields you can type in, such as caption, but link is not one of them. All right, so I press the 3-spotted button, and it says, where would I like to go? Would I like to go to a pop-up? Would I like to go to a page in a lesson? Well, the first thing we're going to do is just create a simple toolbar button that will appear on the same page that the student's on. So I created a pop-up yesterday called I'm a Toolbar Destination. So I'm going to highlight that pop-up, confirm that it says linking to in this top bar, and then click OK. It's reminding me to save my lesson, which I'll do. Saving, I think, is included in the webinar number 1 on CALI Author, if you want more details. So now I've created a toolbar button. So let's pop back into student mode and see what that looks like. So I click on my student tab, and there, over on the far right-hand side, comes a very large blue banner, a flag, if you will, and it's flapping this little toolbar button, which if I wiggle my cursor over it, I can make it jump back and forth, which is quite exciting. If I actually click on that button, then it takes me to a pop-up that I created yesterday. This is my pop-up over here that I created yesterday. And as we know with pop-ups, let me go there for a second, go into question mode. I put some text there for the pop-up, and then I also inserted a picture. So the reason you might want to use, I'm going to go back to where I was here with my toolbar button, the reason you might want to use a toolbar button is it's an alternative to a pop-up. A pop-up, as you know, is a highlighted band of text in a particular lesson that when students link on it, it takes them directly to a page on the page they're on, so it doesn't leave the current page, but it takes them to more material, almost a post-it note, if you will, on the material. The downside sometimes of a pop-up is students are reading the text and they come upon the hypertext link, and most students then will follow that link. So if you want to get students to think on their own, do I need to consult a different source? Do I need to review the facts? Do I need to look at a statute or a regulation or a diagram that was provided earlier in the lesson? Sometimes it's nice to put it over on the toolbar button or toolbar area. It's not going to be really hidden there, but it does require the student to read this paragraph or several pages of material and think, oh, should I be using something else? Oh, maybe I'll look for it here. A toolbar button also gives the advantage that you can provide the same material on sequential pages without having to create new hyperlinks. Once this toolbar button is created, as it is right now, it's going to appear on every single page in the lesson in sequence. Notice I'm moving to Introduction 2. I'm just going to use my hierarchy here on the left to maneuver, or here it's easier probably if I use the actual forward button. So I'm going to my remote control, I'm moving the forward button. Notice I'm on a second page, and here's my toolbar button. Well, let's suppose I don't want the toolbar button to appear on this page. What do I have to do to get rid of it? I go once again to the Info tab. I go to my Toolbar tab, and there's a phrase here that says, remove any existing toolbar buttons when user arrives at this page. Sounds very useful, so I'm going to check the box. I'm going to save the lesson because I like to save often. So now I'm going to go back to my toolbar origination page. This is where I created the toolbar button, if you recall. Now I'm going to go forward here, and the toolbar button no longer appears. You notice this area is quiet or dark, if you will. So that's one thing that you can do with a toolbar button. You can just add it to provide additional information throughout the lesson to a student. There's also another really cool thing you can do, and that is to control navigation. Let me move CALI Author off to the side here and show you this brightly colored diagram here that I made of how a toolbar button can work. If you're at the top of the horizontal line here, each of these vertical lines represents a question or a page in a lesson. It might be a book page, it might be a question page. So let's suppose that this far left one is the start of the lesson, and this orangish brown one is my introduction page where I just was, and I want to create a toolbar button, and I want the toolbar button to exist for the next two pages as represented by these varying sizes of purple dots and this hash line. But then when I get to this other page right here, I'm going to remove the toolbar button. Okay, we just did that. That's pretty straightforward. The student progresses through the lesson, and let's suppose that at this point in the lesson, way at the far end of our horizontal line, and we're still at the north side of the horizontal line also, let's suppose that you want to give the student material to review. Let's suppose that you're asking them a more complicated question, and it covers material. It asks them to apply material that they learned about and read about in this opening purple section at the far left of the screen. So at this point, I would create two toolbar buttons on this particular page. The first toolbar button would ask the student, would you like to review the previous material? So if the student clicks that button, what the toolbar button is going to do is take them back to this brown point in the lesson. And actually, I drop down below the horizontal bar here, and I'm saying, right now, we're going to follow this blue curving line, and the blue button, the blue toolbar button, will take us back to this yellow bar where we're originally in the lesson, or at the start of the lesson, and the student gets to review the material. Now, the buttons, you cannot make the buttons a different color in CALI Author. I just made everything different color so we can sort of follow the schematic, because it was getting confusing to me. So as the student is reviewing the material, imagine that this lesson doesn't have just 7 or 8 questions as I've drawn out here, but imagine the lesson instead has 20 or 30 pages, and you're taking the student back to the very beginning. Well, imagine back to your law school days. How would you feel if your instructor took you back to the very beginning? Faculty that I've talked with feel that their students are going to believe that they're being punished in some way for being taken all the way back to the material. And remember, it's an interactive environment. You can't be there monitoring the student or encouraging them to try it again, look at the material again. So we want to do things when we return the student to nearly the beginning of the lesson to encourage them to follow the link and to let them know, hey, it's okay to go back and review material. You're not being punished for being a bad student, and we're going to give you a way that when you're finished reviewing these purple dotted pages and you've refreshed your recollection and you're ready to tackle the questions again, there's a way for you to jump back to where you were, almost like putting your hand in pages of a book and flipping back a few and then coming to where you were. So we're going to add a second toolbar button on this page right here. The first one says, do you want to review? Remember, and it follows the blue path along the bottom of the diagram. And the second one is a button that's going to exist on this page. It gets created here, but then because the buttons appear on every page forward of that page, this brown page is suddenly becoming a page forward of this vertical line right here. The CALI lessons kind of exist on 2 planes, I guess, at this point. And so the first time through the lesson, the student will not see this second button that says, come back here when you're finished reviewing, which I've represented by this green horizontal line at the bottom of the larger lesson line. This green line representing the second toolbar button will only appear the second time the student goes through this area of the lesson. So this is a pretty cool feature, actually. And this will appear, the student could work through every single page up to the point where they'd been to, or they could review 2 or 3 pages and then click that button and immediately jump back to where they were. Let's suppose, though, that you say, do you want to review, and you instead take them on this unbelievably tortured black line that looks more like a national park path than a line. And if you drop them into the middle of this purple zone here, remember that the first toolbar button was added at this brown vertical line. So and then it was removed at this point 4 pages later. So when you're at the end of the lesson here and you're coming back around, CALI Author thinks the button has been removed. So the student entering in the middle of this purple zone will not have the toolbar button added at the brown spot. So this is kind of high-level toolbar usage, but it does give you some pretty powerful tools for manipulating and providing information to students. So let's see how that actually works in CALI Author. I'm going to drag the software back over, and we're going to create some buttons and follow how they move around. So let's suppose that I've created more complex questions, which is supposed to represent the more difficult aspect of the lesson. So here I'm going to maybe have a fact pattern or something, and then perhaps at this question, I'm going to give the students an opportunity to review material that was maybe covered in what I've labeled my amazing explanation. which is up one section on the hierarchy chart on the left. So I'm going to go into my author mode by clicking questions, which activates authoring mode. I click on my info tab, and I expect you're all following along and saying, oh, click on the toolbar, thank you. So I'm going to click new, and here I'm going to say review material, and I'm going to point the student to my page called Amazing Explanation. I click OK. So now a toolbar button exists that will move the student from complex question 1 back up to Amazing Explanation. Now I also want the student to be able to return to this page at any time. So I'm going to create a second toolbar button. Click New. I'm going to call this Return. And I could get fancy and call it Return to Original Question or something. I'm just going to be brief in my typing. And I am coming back to my complex question number 1. So I'm going to scroll, and there it is, complex question number 1. And there it is. So let me save this. And let's run this and see how it works. I'm going to back up here to the introduction, get a bit of a running start into the lesson. You see here's my toolbar button I created. Remember, it vanishes on the next page. I move forward in my lesson. I hit my my area called questions. This is my best explanation of the law. The student flies through these. Here's a diagram. If you want to add diagrams, see our webinar number 2. Here's some questions, more questions, a nice transition, and I'm into my more complex question section. So here's some material. I'm setting the student up, and now they get the 2 toolbar buttons. If I click on Return first, you see it does nothing because it's taking the student to exactly where they are. However, if I click on Review Material, and you can see this happening, you'll see this gray bar pop from here up a section to Amazing Explanation. So I click that, and here I am on the Most Amazing Explanation. I probably actually would want to click, I probably want to remove the button here on this page. I'd want to remove, well, it's going to be tricky because if I remove the one, I remove both of them. So it's okay, I guess, if I just leave it here. So I've got my review material button here, and the student moves forward, and then when I click return, I jump back again to where they were. And then probably on the next page of the lesson, I would want to remove both of these buttons because they're no longer needed. Although you could have reviewing material throughout the thing, but I'd probably want to make the return button go back to the page I was actually at. So that is the basics of toolbars. Let me show you one other quick thing. If I go to my complex question where I created my toolbars, I can reorder these. Let's suppose I want the return button to be at the top. I can play with these, move down, things like that, move up, move down by highlighting whichever one I want to change the navigation of, and I can resequence my buttons. Very useful if you've added a number of buttons that are statute sections, for example, and you want the statute sections to appear in numerical order, restatement sections, things like that. So at this point, I will open it up to questions if there are any. I'll take you back to my unbelievably complicated multicolored drawing, just in case that inspires some questions. No questions? I was crystal clear? How fantastic.
I have a question.
Okay.
John Mayer.
Hi, John Mayer.
How many do we have very many lessons that use that, especially that review feature of toolbars that you just talked about?
Yes. Actually, it was originally dubbed the Vince Chiappetta review button because Vince initiated using it in either the trademark or the copyright, in the trademark lessons. So if you go to the trademark or copyright lessons, you'll see it being used there because once one fellow figures it out, then it sort of spreads through a fellowship. It's sort of rare in the legal research lessons, although I do have a couple lessons where it's used. I can't pinpoint people to them. If someone really wants to see it in use, they can send me an email, and I would be happy to find a couple lessons to put up as, here's my email address, put up as examples. So I don't know a percentage of our lessons. It's very few, but it's really helpful for complex information, and you can really control the navigation of students through the lesson and make it a very student-centered learning experience for them.
So let me make sure I understand the purpose too.
Sure.
Because you can use a toolbar button like the way you described to go back and review existing pages, you don't have to make duplicate copies of existing pages, which is probably what some authors were doing. They were saying, well, now let's review, and they basically wanted to repeat what they said before, and so they just made copies of those pages, further down in the lesson. Is that fair to say?
Right, right. And as soon as you make duplicate pages in the lesson, anytime you modify the lesson, if I had duplicate pages beneath complex questions and I modify them and they're really duplicates of amazing explanation, then every time I modify amazing explanation pages, I have to remember that those pages exist elsewhere and have to be modified also. So in a way, you're just cutting down on your future revision time. It also, it prevents, the alternative is, you're right, you create duplicate pages and you ask students a question that would turn into a branching question that says, do you want to review this material or not? And this way, it just takes students back through the exact same material. Using a toolbar button is less push education toward the students. It allows the student to sort of think, wow, I wish there was something that I could use. I'm not seeing anything on the page that's super obvious or that's pushing me to learn this material again, but I know that the professor traditionally gives me resources along this toolbar. Is there anything helpful there? And the student also knows that they're going back into the lesson. The word review generally suggests a coverage a second time, a repeat, a rerun sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. Well, keep in mind you can link to pop-ups with toolbar buttons. You can put any additional supporting documents or diagrams in. So that's pretty nifty. And when I say a document, I don't mean a PDF or a Word document. I do mean an image or text. Well, if that's everything, I skipped here are a couple pages. Let me get back to my PowerPoint. And this is our exciting conclusion. And we do have, I know what page I missed here. Hold on. I missed our next CALI webinar. Here we go. Our next CALI webinar is Friday, September 11th in Austin, and Elmer Masters are going to give you a guide to using the CALI website. And then on the 18th, we've got another webinar, Alternative to Course Management Software. So thank you all very much for attending. Thank you for participating in CALI's webinar program. And that's all from CALI.